Happy Wednesday, runners. Welcome to our Wednesday Facebook Live chat with our partners, Hospital for Special Surgery. I am Coach Ben, and I'm joined today by physical therapist from Hospital for Special Surgery, Cristina Martello. Cristina, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
It's a beautiful day outside.
Beautiful. It's perfect race weather day.
We were actually talking about it on the way over with one of my colleagues. It is really the kind of day you want to get out for a run. For all of you who live on the Eastern Seaboard, we just suffered 4 days straight of rain.
Yes.
Hopefully no one came in with injuries from the rain. No runners came in like, I went for an extra run in the rain. No?
Not yet. I think everyone stayed sane and kept their doors shut this weekend.
That's not a trait most runners have. How do they pull that one off? You know, they just did it.
It was a downpour, you know. We have to take it while we can.
I think some runners say if we're not training, if it's not raining, or it's not raining, we're not training, I guess maybe not the smartest thing. Stay inside, right?
Stay inside. I mean, we've all had those many long runs, college long runs in the rain. My coach used to say, practice is never canceled, even in a tornado.
Wow, that's hardcore coach right there. Not even a tornado. Well, you know what, runners, whatever the case may be, thank you so much for joining us. We had the New Balance Bronx 10 miler was a couple weeks ago. Talk about a great day to run. That was a fantastic day. We had our first cross country race up in Van Cortlandt. Did you run? I know you said you ran track. Did you run cross country, or
Yes.
did you basically just stay?
I did run cross, and that was our home cross country race. Turf in college, I'll say.
So you're familiar with the back hills?
Yes, absolutely.
Freshman Hill.
We know the back hills, Freshman Hills, and then the big old 2.5, 4K for the Catholics high schools.
Well, we have 2 more cross-country races coming up. Maybe you'll jump into one of those, maybe not.
Maybe I should. I'll go take a peek.
Will you relive, or will it be like PTSD?
Always PTSD.
PTSD, okay. Well, runners, if you haven't jumped in there, please check them out. Our cross-country races up at Van Cortlandt Park. Beautiful. I live uptown, so I go to Van Cortlandt quite often. Check it out. It's fun, especially fall's coming, the leaves change.
Yes, beautiful environment.
It's a really unique experience, but maybe you did Bronx, but maybe runners out there, we do have our TCS, New York City Marathon, 18-mile training run. It's not a race. It is our training run for all of you out there getting ready for November 5th. I don't know, have you ever done the 18-mile training run?
I did.
So you did the 3 loops of Central Park.
3 loops of Central Park.
Favorite loop, first, second, or third?
First.
It was easy then, right?
It felt good then.
It felt good then.
Still positive.
That third loop definitely can be challenging. Again, runners, maybe you're out there running that one. Maybe you have questions about it. Maybe you got marathon training questions. Hopefully, not too many injury questions, but that's why we're here. Because, you know, Cristina, she loves talking about injuries. She loves all the runner questions, right? All the runner questions. So drop those questions in the chat if you would be. Let us know where you're listening from as well. It's always fun to find out. We have runners from all over the world. People in New York, people across the ocean, people in Australia, people from Japan. I haven't had a listener from Antarctica yet. Just tossing it out there. You never know. Maybe if you're down at the South Pole, drop it in there. We'll give you a shout out. Because again, we love our running community out there. But let's just jump into segment 1. Again, November 5th literally feels around the corner. I think we're, 40 days out? Anyone confirm? 40 days, 39 days? I don't know. We're closer than we were yesterday to the marathon today, folks. A lot of runners are getting out there. We talk about it often, but most runners don't do it. Pre-Hab. Why is it so important? Maybe it's a little late for you runners training today for Pre-Hab. But why is it important, and how can it help improve a runner or help them during their training?
Sure. So preventative rehabilitation is one of my favorite things to encourage in runners. Really what we're looking to do is prevent yourself from getting injured so you can ultimately achieve the goal that you want to achieve, whether it's just completing the race or having a certain time. But you also want to improve your efficiency while you're running. You want to be out there feeling good, and you don't want to be feeling like you're spending all this energy to do one task versus another person who might be spending a lot less energy doing the same task. And so I always tell my runners, the breakdown of your marathon training is 50% of the running and the mileage that you're doing, but the other 50% is going to be that preventative care. And that breakdown looks like, I like to say, 3 buckets. Your strength training portion, which is keyword strength training, and your dynamic movement and your preparation to run, and then as well as your recovery, which also would include your stretching, your sleep, your nutrition. And so just to talk about the biggest portion of that 50% is our strength training. And you really don't want to neglect any part of your body. We always say our legs are doing most of the work when we're running, but in fact, we need the strong foundation. And so that's going to come from training your abdomen, training your hips, training your glutes, your quads, your hamstrings, and then the whole lower leg. And I think we'll talk a little bit later about some specifics for that. So that's one aspect, the strength training, and that should be considered maintenance program. We don't have to talk about it as like building big muscles or hypertrophy, but a maintenance program. And so now if we think like we're, like you said, 40 days, maybe that 6-week time frame away from marathon, we shouldn't be doing anything new. We shouldn't be doing anything exciting in terms of our strength training, just the basics that are going to keep your muscles doing what they're supposed to do, function how they're supposed to do. And then stretching and recovery.
What? Roberta's do that?
Who does that? Right? I'm not guilty of leaving college practice without stretching ever. That's why I'm washed up now. But, stretching is, if you don't put your body back to its normal function and normal anatomy, you're going to lead to breakdown. And so if I have to hammer home, the two biggest things are strengthening and recovery. And that's what prevention is all about, to achieve your goal.
It's funny. I mean, those are like 3 bad words in the runners: like strength, stretch, and recovery. Do we do those? I mean, I always joke with runners, like, your Garmin tells you so much. When it tells you to recover, do you do that? And they're like, I don't know, maybe sometimes. Because it's true. If you don't do the simple things, you have to take care of yourself. We all want to get to the start line healthy. That's what I tell runners. Because if you don't get there, you're probably not going to run the race you train for, right?
Right. And this is very much a situation where specific per each individual, but less is more, especially as you start to wind down on your last 6 weeks of training.
Yeah, right. You're in that peak phase almost in your training. You're really not adding too much more. And you already touched on it, nothing new at this point, but someone's always going to be like, well, I've always heard leg day's good, an extra leg day, right?
What about a deadlift? We'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that later. Exactly. And we're talking off camera before we started. There was a runner that came. You were in the finish line tent last year with HSS. And the runner was having some calf tightness, and you were like, let's stretch out your calves. And they were like, how do you do that? So, we all have, as runners, we run. That's what we like to do. And taking care of ourselves is maybe not our strongest sense. We're getting better there. But so when a runner comes to you and has that question, like, that hasn't done that, so you're working for Pre-Hab, what are some really like simple things, just like some key points you can give a runner to start that process?
Right, in terms of stretching?
Yeah.
So, we always want to target the entire body. And so in terms of stretching, what we really want to look to do is relax the muscles that we just used. So if we're talking from the hip down, I have kind of like a core 4, core 5 that I like to use. And they could be both dynamic stretches before you go out for your run, or after you run, the static stretching. And so that's also key, what you're doing before and after. If I have to just name a few, I always go for glute stretching. So a quick, pull your knee to chest. You could do that dynamically while you're warming up. Hamstring stretching. So dynamically, that could look like some scoops, some leg kicks, or even just a static stretch after you run with a strap, foot to head. Your quad, so a good old hip flexor stretch. You could do some walking lunges with a twist in order to get them fired up before you run, or even just a static half kneeling stretch with an arm overhead. And I'm sure we can list these out for everyone. And then your calves, hit the wall, throw your foot up on the wall, feel the tugging, and hold for about 30 seconds, and do that a couple of times. You never want to do a 5-second stretch. It's not very useful for you, and we all love to do that. But if you take yourself through about 1 minute to 2 minutes of sustained hold, 30 seconds at a time, that's going to be most useful.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan of the 5-second stretch. I'm in, I'm out, I'm done. It's not a good thing. It's tough because, again, once you're done with the run, you want to get out of your wet clothes or in the dry clothes or in the shower. But take time, take care of yourself, runners. It's so important to do that because, it feels good. A nice stretch feels good because we don't want to get injured, and doing these small things can help us. So let's talk about it. There's so many different ways a runner can be injured, and it's not fun. Nobody wants to be injured, and especially this time of year. If you're a first-time marathoner out there, maybe let us know if you're a first-time marathoner. We love those. Drop those questions in there. This is a great time to ask those questions. As we get closer, a first-time marathoner, their volume is building. They probably never have been in this space, potentially, in terms of their overall weekly mileage, let alone the total miles they've run just to get to this point. They're probably doing their longest long runs. Every week could be a new milestone.
Right.
So you're starting to see the creaks, the tweaks and the creaks in the facade. They're trying to keep themselves safe. what are some common injuries you see? When should a runner be when should a runner be concerned? Like, whoa, as opposed to, okay, I can take care of that. And what should they watch out for? So what are they looking for? Like, what kind of injuries are we looking for? And when should they be more concerned about other ones?
Sure. So when you look at marathon athletes in general, the majority of injuries that we see are going to be overuse injuries, and that can manifest in a couple different ways, but the biggest way we'll see it is like your tendinitis is, or kind of a breakdown when a muscle is not functioning the way it's supposed to function, and then that tendon gets that extra inflammation. It's taking up too much slack, taking up too much pressure that it shouldn't be doing. And so couple of the common ones we see, if we start from the top down, are going to be a hip flexor tendinitis, maybe some patellofemoral pain or IT band syndrome, some shin splints, and even posterior tibialis tendinitis, which is at that inner ankle area. And so that's when you might start to feel a little ache and pain during a run, and usually tell yourself, hey, that'll go away tomorrow. I'll stretch it out or something. And then we don't really take care of it. And when something's starting to linger over that 24 to 48 hour period, you can't find a way to diminish your symptoms or your pain, especially when you're in marathon training, you should listen to it earlier than later, always. And that's kind of a blanket statement. If you're just going out on a run and you're able to fix things up and there's no end goal or race in sight, that's a different story. But in this case, the sooner you feel something, if its symptoms are not resolving, seek help from a physical therapist, seek help from a doctor, and learn the precise ways that you can be targeting, strengthening, and reducing your symptoms. The other thing we really see commonly in runners is stress fractures, and that's another overuse type of injury. And not to get daunting, but that's kind of the injury that is going to prevent you from running the race. It's going to be the shutdown when it happens. So if you're starting to feel this nagging type of deep pain, you can't really pinpoint it superficially, but something feels off, whether it's at your hip, in the shaft of your thigh, or even in your foot or ankle, you want to seek care right away, because that is what's going to be detrimental for you. And that happens when, just like you said, we're progressing our load too much, especially first-time marathoners. So you want to keep all of these things in mind and consider, in a situation where you have an end goal in mind, seek care and get your targeted plan.
It's something, an extra recovery day, like you're talking about the ones that, like your itises, come up. An extra rest day can be so huge.
Exactly.
Because again, it's always better to get to the start line healthy. Be a little undertrained than overtrained, because if you keep pushing and pushing, that itis becomes an outis, and then you're done. And then you're not going to have a lot of fun there, folks.
Exactly.
Again, no, strength is always going to be the key. You talked about earlier how important that is. What workouts can we do to strengthen? Everyone has weak areas, whether you have weak glutes, hamstrings, lower leg. People forget that running is a one-legged sport. You are bouncing back and forth.
Exactly.
Lower foot, your ankle. What are things that, if you had 3 key workouts that a runner can do to help strengthen some weakened areas, let's just kind of focus on the lower body. Let's see what those, what would 3 good workouts be for someone to help strengthen that to get them through this?
So exercise specifically, what I always like to, I'll say 3, but also to be comprehensive, you want to hit glutes, hips, you want to hit quads, hamstrings, and you want to hit lower leg. So if I have to pick a few exercises for each of those categories, we'll do it that way. When it comes to your hips, a couple random exercises, and again, I hope we can write these down for you guys. Hips, you want to look at glute strengthening. So that can be your banded sidewalks, your banded hip clocks, your split lunges, lateral lunges, your RDLs and glute bridges. So there's a whole plethora of glute strengthening exercises that we need, and that's what's going to help you propel yourself forward. That hip extension and hip abduction exercise. The hip abductors are going to be the ones that stabilize you on the single leg, okay? So as much as we're talking about hip strengthening, a lot of that comes double-sided, but when it comes to our quads and hammies, we can really target those in a single limb pattern, and we can work on our single leg squats, our single leg RDLs. And anytime we're in a single limb position, we're going to simultaneously target our glutes, our hip abductors. And that's what's going to give us stability every time we land on one leg. So you can really, and we could always break this down for you guys written out, but anytime you're working on a single limb exercise, you're really hitting two birds with one stone. And then lastly, for the lower leg, thinking your calves, your shins, your anterior leg, you can take any exercise I just said, add a little calf raise to it, or add a little band around the arches of your feet. So if you're doing side steps or hip clocks, keep your arches lifted, and you're going to get those inner intrinsic as well as some extrinsic foot muscles working as well. And we could do a lot with one or two simple exercises for the whole lower leg.
And the foot is so important, and people don't realize that those are the tires that keep you on the road. Take care of your feet, folks. Take care of those out there. I know up on our YouTube channel, actually HSS, we did a bunch of videos that are up there right now that I think cover some of that. So runners, if you go out there, search NYRR, New York Road Runners, our YouTube channel. A lot of the videos are up there. A lot of the exercises that you talked about are up there that we've done with other specialists. So check them out because they're so important. We want to make sure we're healthy, get to the start line. But I think we're going to kick it over to some questions and shout outs. What do we got?
How do you heal plantar fasciitis? Does it ever go away?
Oh, the ever popular plantar. How do we heal it? Can we just wave some hands over it and it goes away?
I wish we could. A little bit of a magic wand.
Harry Potter, plantar fasciitis go away. Yes, doesn't work.
So
no, it doesn't work that way.
Unfortunately, no.
Bummer.
Plantar fasciitis can be kind of a beast, and we can experience it for different reasons. We can experience it because of overuse and some breakdown, or it can be more of like a long-standing battle that you maybe have had prior to even starting your running. So the biggest thing I like to stress with plantar fasciitis is flexibility of the entire posterior chain of your body. So that means the back of your body, okay? So we have fascia that runs all the way from the top of your head, through your back, into your glutes, into your hamstrings, calves, and eventually curve underneath your heel and goes into that fascia. It's all connected. And so if we're not keeping good flexibility throughout the whole back of your body, because the foot is the first thing that impacts the ground, sometimes we get a manifestation of pain there. So as much as everyone knows about, I'm rolling my foot out on an ice water bottle for plantar fasciitis, that's good, and I want you to do that. I always encourage it. But continue to incorporate calf stretching, hamstring stretching, glute stretching, and keep your hips very strong. If your hips are not strong, when you impact the ground, your foot's going to take up even more impact. But we need to remember that we need strength from the top of the chain in order to save your feet and your knees. So it does go away. It does take a lot of care. And again, it's something you want to hit from the ground running, meaning as soon as you feel it, work on that flexibility and hip strength.
Plantar, I mean, that's just one. A lot of runners deal with that, and it's never fun. It does seem to never go away for some people. So great information. What else you got for us?
All right, we have two more. How do you manage a tailbone bruise while continuing training?
Ooh, a tailbone bruise. That's just got to be right there. Yeah, it's painful.
Yeah. So tailbone bruise is interesting, and it's a tough question to answer per se, because I'd like to know really how it happened. If you experienced a fall and that's why it's bruised, or if it's kind of this repetitive, maybe imbalance of the muscles that attach to the sacrum, and that's why you're feeling the bruise. So in terms of bone bruising, we think of it, say you hit your thigh and you have a big bruise on your thigh and you see the bruise and eventually it goes away, and maybe it takes a couple of days or weeks. But when it comes to bones that are bruised, it actually takes quite some time, maybe even 3 to 6 months, sometimes even longer. So this is a case where I would advise you to consult a doctor, maybe get some imaging, see really what we're dealing with in terms of the tailbone or the sacrum itself. And managing it may have to be a very specific load that you can confide in your therapist or even exercise physiologist or running coach about when you might have to pull back and when what you can cut out, what you can't cut out. So not a specific answer, but it's one that needs more individualization. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, pain in the butt's not fun at all there,
No.
folks. It's not a fun one, folks. One more question for what we got.
Thoughts on sauna for recovery?
Thoughts on a sauna for recovery? So like heat versus cold, maybe. I mean, that's the same one, yeah.
Sure. So my initial thought is that I am not a huge fan, and this is the reason why. When you are running, you are already perspiring a lot. You're losing salts, electrolytes that you need to replenish well in order for your body to wake up the next day or the next 2 days and complete whatever other physical activity is part of your program. So if we're going to purposely put ourselves in a situation where we're even losing more of those needed electrolytes, we're going to have a more difficult time recovering. In fact, we want to do the opposite. We want to replenish. We want to give our body rest. We want to hydrate. And it's not the time during marathon training to think about losing calories or losing weight. We want to do this healthily. We don't want to do it in a caloric deficit, because ultimately you won't be able to necessarily complete the race or cross the finish line the way you want to. So hydrate instead.
Hydrate. Enjoy that after the race. Always, everything that you put off during these, how long your training cycle was, that's for November 6th,
Sure.
7th, 8th. Anything before that in November, hop in the sauna, do whatever you want to do. That, as people like to call, this is when you get back in touch with your couch, because you missed it, and all of your friends that you've neglected too.
You're allowed to.
Yeah, you're allowed to. Well, I think we're going to go back to, you touched on it earlier with the planner HSS question, the back and how important it is. So again, runners think so much from the waist down. We think the waist up is whatever is going to happen, when it's really not. It's so much important. Our arms are so important. The core is so important. You touched on the back and the fascia that goes down. So let's talk about that. Let's get into back pain. Let's talk about, besides you talking about with the planner, how does our back help us, and why is it so important that we don't neglect that area as well?
So the back is, I would say, one of the most important aspects of running. It's actually our foundation. And if you think about, like any good thing in life, if we don't have a good foundation, we're not going to be able to let the rest of the parts of life or the parts of your body do what it needs to do. So when you think about the back or the spine, I'll say, we could split it in two ways. We can split it muscularly, and then we can split it structurally. Muscularly, the muscles of the back, all the way from the base of your head all the way down to your hips, are endurance static muscles. So those are the muscles that are on all of the time, and they're the muscles that are preventing you from falling forward. Okay, so if you think about that in your running, if those muscles aren't performing the way they need to, eventually you're going to cave forward, you'll lose your form, your biomechanics will become really poor, and that's when we're going to waste a lot of that energy. Like I said, we're going to have a poor running economy. So making sure that the back muscles are strengthened in that static way, so they have endurance, is one importance. And then structurally, the spine itself gives you support. It is the column of your body. So when we talk about your core and strengthening your core, we know that the core is what is going to give your spine support. So since your spine is supporting you, we need to give it support back. And that's where strengthening of the core comes about.
Yeah, the core, it's always amazing that as runners, we just focus so much from the waist down. I mean, the hips, we talk about the glutes, we think so much more of our quads, our calves, our feet, but we forget, we neglect those areas in our back and our core that are so important. And sometimes, if we haven't taken care of it, ever popular lower back pain. I think our question about the bruised tailbone kind of falls into this. You have the lower back pain, sometimes not quite healing right. What are some causes for lower back pain? Again, it goes back to when should we be concerned? When should we see a doctor? You talked about scans will always help, and it's hard as runners to do that. We don't want to hear those professionals tell us that we don't want to hear. But what are some causes of our lower back pain, and what do I watch out for?
Sure. So low back pain is another big beast that we can't always generalize, but if we do want to put this into buckets, back pain comes in different shapes and sizes for everyone. But let's put it into buckets for a second. And let's say we can have a hypermobility issue where we have lack of stability, or we can have a hypomobility issue where we have too much stability and not enough movement. And a lot of that can become painful or exacerbated with overuse and constant impact like running. So if we're going to go down the too much motion category, that can be caused from a lot of different things: lack of, core strengthening, anteriorly tilted pelvis, tightness of the hip flexors, weakness of the hip muscles, and that could eventually lead to a stress fracture. So in a really extreme case, we want to be very careful, but that's when we will be working on purely core strengthening, and versus maybe the hypomobile person who maybe is a little more like middle-aged to an older athlete and may have some predisposed stenosis or degeneration going on, maybe history of some disc issues too, but is really training through that. That's when we could deal with pain that comes from the opposite end of the spectrum. In that case, we want to do a little more mobility, but still always strengthen the core.
It's always about that strength.
Hard to generalize again, but
yeah.
if we put it into two buckets.
Yeah, but again, it's important that you have to be aware. I think awareness helps. That's really the key is because, you never know because once you get training, it's so hard sometimes. I don't want to stop. I have a goal. I want to do this. And the marathon, for so many runners, whether it's a TCS in New York City Marathon or any other marathon around the world, it's a goal. It's a bucket list item for so many runners. But we've talked about you want to be healthy to start there. And so taking some of the stuff here. And so we talk about, trying to strengthen those areas. Obviously, not everybody has access to a gym, so maybe some stuff at home. Maybe sitting in these director's chairs with these wonderful support as you watch this slide. Sasha, sit back up again. We are actually getting a back workout in on these chairs today. But what are some things that people either at home or at a gym, some simple workouts that can really help runners strengthen that back area?
Sure. So when you think about core strengthening, I always say I'm not particular with my athletes and my runners as they core strengthen, but as long as they're doing it the right way. So what does that mean? It means that when I'm down on the floor doing my crunches or doing my, penguins or whatever you want to call them, my low back is attached to the floor, and that means my lower abdominal muscle, the transverse abdominis, the one that gives me a core sit, is pulled down and engaged. So step number one before I prescribe to you any core exercise is that we can do it the right way, that we can keep our ribs down, we can keep the core engaged, and then we build from there. So a couple of really, really easy exercises would be some pelvic tilts, some abdominal settings, some basic crunches, some oblique work, and then you make things harder by progressing your legs coming up off the floor. And that's when we could get into a little bit of a danger zone if we're doing something too advanced for what we can handle. But as long as you remember to engage your core tight through the spine, you'll be able to do those, flutter kicks or scissors or even V-ups in a little bit more of extreme situation. But additionally, I want to add that a couple different things actually. You can train your core while working on the rest of your body and doing the lower leg exercises and doing the upper body exercises. So similarly, by imagining you're pulling your belly tight to your spine and ribs down, that's going to activate your core for stability. When we run, we don't think of it so much as a rotational exercise, but there is some rotation. And the biggest thing that we want to think about is our core being that anti-rotation component. So other basic exercises like a Palloff press or kneeling chops are going to be really important in order to train that stability while your periphery is moving. And I think that that's tougher to do on your own. I always encourage people to come in for rehab so they can get some good ideas and know that they're, again, killing multiple birds with one stone. And then the last piece of that is I always encourage Pilates or even bar classes. In New York City especially, we have a lot of access to different gyms and classes. And I'm a big fan of those two categories of exercise because they focus on the foundational core that similarly to physical therapy.
Yeah, and that cross training is so important. As runners, we run. We don't want to do everything talked about. The strength, the stretch, recovery. 3 words that most runners never want to talk about. But it's so important that we do those things because we want to get there healthy. And it's some great tips. I'm a big fan of dead bugs. If you can do those,
bugs, bird dogs.
Yeah, I love those. Yeah, they're all
planks.
Good.
As long as
planks.
you're doing them the right way.
Right.
We have a plethora, and again, we can always list them out for you guys, so we can, you can have a go-to list. But all of the above, anything that's turning on your core for a prolonged period of time. Planks with rotations, dips, clamshells.
I was saying, because like a clamshell, even like a fire hydrant, you're in that position, you're engaging the core, but you're using the hip and the glutes. And you talked about it earlier. It's that whole chain. Like everything's connected, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, top to bottom, you can't forget
that good old
song. Everything, the hip bones connected to all those fun things. I will spare you my singing. Don't worry, I don't want anybody to turn their rotations off just yet today. I think we got some more questions. We don't have any shout outs out there as well, so we'll go to questions and shout outs. Hit it.
All right, we have a shout out to Jeffrey watching. Thank you for watching, Jeffrey. And then a couple more questions. Is it normal to have foot tendon pain after running?
Is it
Foot tendon, you said?
pain? Is it normal to have foot tendon pain after running? I guess no.
So when we talk about pain, we don't want to say anything is normal per se, but sure, we can always talk about things that might not be abnormal. But in this case, no, I would not say that it's normal for you to have tendon pain. And just like I mentioned earlier, if this is something that's nagging at you, and it also depends on where you're feeling the pain. Pain in your foot can be dangerous. It can be a tendon that's overworked, or it can be a metatarsal that's going to experience a stress reaction or a stress fracture. So if you're having this consistent nagging pain at the foot, especially after you run and it doesn't go away within a 24-hour period, definitely go get that checked out. The foot is a big area where we have malunion or non-union fractures, which means there's more of a risk that it's not going to fuse the way it should. And so it's something we really don't want to have as a means of keeping you out of the race. So foot pain, get it checked.
Get it checked. And pain is kind of weird. If you're a parent of a teenager out there, I think pain is normal because teenagers are fun. But foot pain's different, I guess, in this case.
And I also want to help you differentiate between soreness and pain. Soreness is, I just use my muscle, I stretch it out, feels better, I'm good to go, and nothing is prohibiting me. But if you feel that doesn't feel right every time I take a step, then that's a different situation, and that's when we should look into things.
Check it out. Perfect. What else you got for us?
If I'm having knee pain 4 weeks out of running the marathon, how do I decide what to do?
You decide what to do by coming to see one of us. We really want to differentiate between, is this something that's going to take you out of the race, or is this something that we can minimally pull back, work on what's causing the problem, and scale you still to achieve your goal. Again, if it's a tendinitis type issue or a patellofemoral syndrome and we're really just dealing with like tight fascia that we can easily loosen up and a little bit of glute strengthening and get you back on track, I'd say it's an easy fix, especially under guidance from a physical therapist or exercise physiologist. But if it's something that, I take that back. At this point, you want to get it checked. You don't want to do this on your own because you might not feel so great on race day. So easy fix if we can identify it right away. It's
funny how like something like a knee pain could be a hip or ankle issue because they're compensation sometimes because that's what our bodies will naturally do that, right? I heard here, I'll adjust. So something to be mindful of as well for runners?
Absolutely. I always tell my patients that the knee does not have a brain of its own. It listens to what the hip or the ankle are telling it to do, especially because a lot of the muscles they come from the hip or they come from the ankle and they attach on the knee. So it's the middle ground and it takes up a lot of the slack for something that might be going wrong up or down. So you don't want to ignore that.
And that's why it's important to go see someone like Cristina and get checked out. What else you got for us?
Shout out to Christy. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. No more questions. We're good to go. We are at the Bell Lab here, AJ. I'll got that ready. There we go. So we were talking before. You ran the 2019 TCS New York City Marathon. Fun day?
Amazing day.
Amazing day.
Yes, absolutely. Top 10 in life.
So if you had to pick one moment during the race, what would be that top moment?
I will say a little bit of victory after the storm. Let's put it that way. So after mile 17, I started catching a cramp in my left leg, right? Never happened. I did all the right things. I know what I'm talking about, right? But kept cramping. Every half mile, had to stop, stretch. It's okay. But I would say the best moment is I got to, I know I'm not supposed to talk about finishing the marathon as the best.
But it is.
But I saw my family right at the base of the park, and in that moment, I had no longer any calf cramps, and it felt very special to me because my eyesight was on getting to them and getting towards the finish line. And when I finally saw them, I said, "Cramps are gone. No matter what, I'm going to finish this race." So.
And you were born in Queens, so what was it like to run through your home borough?
Amazing. I've always been a prideful New Yorker, and I will always say that New York City is the best marathon that ever could exist, not because I'm biased, but because you see all the unity and all the camaraderie, and it sounds very cliche, and I know we all say it here, but getting to live something that you're prideful about is really special.
It is true. When you get to run through all the boroughs, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, the Bronx, there is something unique about each one, whether you're born and raised here, you live here most of your life, you moved here just recently, you're just coming in just to do the race. You really do see it. It's really nothing else like it. The city does come out and support us. Runners, thank you so much for joining us today. I said check out our YouTube channel for those hospital for special surgery, the strength videos we have. We also have our TCS New York City Marathon course experience up there on our YouTube channel. If you want to hear more about the boroughs as we go through, we're taking you through. Actually, the Queens episode just dropped today with our wonderful Kathy Weisen from HSS. Cristina, thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe we'll see you at a race in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'll sign up for something soon.
Sign up. See, it's all it takes, folks. A little encouragement out there. Have a great day, runners. We'll see you at the start line.
Thanks.